Hello, beautiful souls, beautiful human beings. Hello, hello. Thanks for dropping by this video. To anyone who's new to this channel is dedicated to helping people understand the difference between authentic non-duality and Neo-Advaita or Neo-Non-Duality, a watered down and dangerous version of non-duality, and to recover from the harmful effects of Neo-Advaita. If you'd like more information, you can click on the link that's there or there. So, many things on my mind and heart today around Neo-Advaita and the process of recovering from it. I think what's most real for me in this moment is to share, and I've mentioned this before, Neo-Advaita cuts off relation. It cuts off relation with other people. It cuts off relation with yourself. And so a huge thing for me has been around starting to learn to reconnect with other people. Part of how I've done that is through community support groups. I think I've shared on this channel that I've struggled with addictive behavior. So finding that's been a beautiful place where I found some community is in addiction support groups. But another key piece for me is about having a relationship with a higher power. So I'm not here to preach, and I am here to share what's been helpful for me. So the Neo-Advaita concept of higher power is just like this nothingness void consciousness, this very impersonal force. I mean, there's different takes on it. For some Neo-Advaita teachers, it's like this impersonal force. For some, it's just like this absolute void nothingness. So regardless where on the spectrum a particular Neo-Advaita teacher falls, between sort of just impersonal force and just like absolute nothingness, it's kind of hard to have a relationship with this thing, especially if it's nothingness. Many Neo-Advaita teachers would even laugh at the idea of having a relationship with ultimate reality, with whether you call it God or consciousness or source, Brahman, being, consciousness, bliss. So much of Neo-Advaita focuses just on this idea of awareness, simple awareness, always present, but just this neutral. So A, it's hard to have a relationship with such a thing, and B, most Neo-Advaita teachers would literally laugh at or mock the idea of having a relationship with the Supreme. And yet, Ramana Maharshi himself was quite a bhakta, which means a devotee of God. He composed and sang love poems to God. Adi Shankara, the founder of, or you could say the first person who systematized non-duality, he was an absolute devotee of the goddess. So any person teaching non-duality that doesn't include a deep sense of devotion and on a certain level relationship with this higher power really isn't teaching non-duality. They're teaching a very incomplete version of non-duality that scholars and yogis and sages within the tradition call Neo-Advaita, because it's incomplete. And as I've just been sharing about, it's actually, and I'm not the only one, it's very, very dangerous. And this is one of the reasons it's dangerous. To be in relationship, to be in connection is a fundamental aspect of being a human. You can't just bypass it. I tried. Didn't work out so well. Hence, I'm in recovery from that. the need for connection and relationship, you just can't like ignore it. It's going to work out as well as trying to ignore your need for food and water. Like you can do it for a little bit, but it's going to come back and bite you. So part of how traditional Advaita deals with the need for connection is through cultivating a devotional relationship with the Supreme, with the divine. And again, it's hard to talk about this because Neo-Advaita, you know, if you had mentioned this to me like 5 years ago when I was still in the Neo-Advaita paradigm, I would have been like, have a relationship with the Supreme? What the blankety blank are you talking about? Because Neo-Advaita just so like it creates a tunnel of like, I'm only going to think these thoughts, I'm only going to do these practices, I'm only going to it's so limiting. And so about 2018, I was like, I really need to incorporate bhakti. I knew in my mind and heart, and bhakti means devotion, that was the missing piece for me. And it's literally taken me 5 years to really begin to take that up, to cultivate. I mean, I've done it little bits here and there, to do devotional practices such as kirtan, to begin to cultivate the emotion and flavor of relationship with the Supreme. And it's something I still struggle with because I've been trained, and then I was trained, and then I started to train myself, of like just this impersonal vision and view of higher power, of ultimate reality. And this is where it gets really interesting. And then, of course, I was trying to emulate that. Like, if that's the supreme impersonal nothingness or just neutral consciousness, then I just tried to become that. Like, I was meditating all the time and I was thinking that's the highest. And of course, I had a false image of Ramana Maharshi that he just sat around, did nothing, and told people, you are consciousness, when nothing could be further from the truth. He was a very active dude. And so I've talked about the fact that there are different schools of Vedanta, and Advaita is just one school. And so I've taken a peek at some of the other schools. Vashishta, and I've posted this before, and I just cannot people to, and just finding this was so liberating for me. I'm going to post this here. The main schools of Vedanta, to just realize that Advaita is just merely a sub-school. Vedanta means the final knowledge, or the ultimate knowledge, or the knowledge that the completion of knowledge. It has many translations. And Advaita is just one sub-school, one interpretation. Like, what is the final knowledge? Well, in Neo-Advaita, we've been hammered with this idea over and over and over that, like, Advaita, non-duality, or in this case, neo-non-duality, is the final knowledge. Well, that's just an opinion. And it's not been the consensus opinion in Indian or Vedic philosophy for the last 1,000 years. It's just one voice. It's really interesting. So let's see if there's anything else I want to say. The thing with spiritual bypass is, if you don't tend to human needs in a healthy way, then they're going to show up in an unhealthy way. And actually, I'd love to give an example of how and why spiritual bypass doesn't work. So Neo-Advaita is just one example. Spiritual bypass is just kind of bypassing, ignoring, or dissociating from your humanity, from your thoughts and feelings, using spiritual techniques in a way that ends up being unhealthy. Um, so so this isn't 100% spiritual bypass, but so I've been doing road trips the last couple weeks, and this will be my third weekend doing it. It's been really great, actually. Um, and I've been doing Airbnbs to save money because it's just less expensive than hotels. Um, but the thing is, I'm a very sensitive sleeper, and one of those things two things: noise and temperature. So I've been, before I've gone to each place, I've asked the person about how quiet is it. But what I haven't asked about is the temperature. So the first weekend, like I just couldn't modulate the temperature. It was too hot, too cold constantly, and I had to leave early. The second weekend, it happened again. And guess what just happened on the third weekend? Once again, nice and quiet. I checked on that, and this time I even checked: is there a heater? But it's not. It's not a good heater. It kind of goes up and down. So this isn't exactly spiritual bypass, but what this is an example of, like, I'm not connected. I'm not honoring. I'm not taking care of, not tending to my human self as skillfully as possible. Like this time, I did check on a heater. So I haven't slept well. And so this is why this is just a prime example of how Neo-Advaita doesn't work, because it completely teaches you to dissociate from yourself and to not listen to and not honor yourself. So, and then to go back to what I started with about relationship is it's not possible to have healthy human relationships unless you have some level of connection with yourself, right? Like in this case, I'm disconnected from myself and I've been making choices that haven't been good for me. But that gets multiplied times 10 when you get another person involved, right? When someone's like, hey, how do you feel about da da da? And you're like, whatever. Instead of checking in with yourself, you're like, whatever. If you want to do that, let's do that. Sometimes that works. Like sometimes, you just go with the flow, and sometimes it really doesn't work. And it's not sustainable to have and I'm not even just talking about a romantic relationship. I'm also talking about friendship or a working relationship of where you're like, whatever. Like that's kind of Neo-Advaita in a nutshell. Like, whatever. Like it just teaches you to just be like, I'm consciousness. I'm the witness. I'm gonna just detach from these thoughts and feelings. And yes, having some detachment from thoughts and feelings is healthy and helpful, but not in the sense of like, whatever, like just throwing away all thoughts and feelings. So, wow, got 3 live viewers. Welcome, welcome. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And I think that's all I have to say. That's yeah. Please post anything if you'd like to. I'll talk a little more. That's one of the painful things of recovering from Neo-Advaita is Neo-Advaita offers a false, simple solution. Like, you don't have to deal with all that human stuff. Just inquire. Or you don't have to deal with all that human stuff. You are consciousness. You're already enlightened. And it promises like, hey, you won't have any problems anymore if you follow this path. So it's very enticing, but it doesn't work. And so part of my process of recovering from Neo-Advaita has been grieving, you know? Because I was like, oh, I'm not going to have to deal with all this human stuff. Like, I'm just going to inquire. Well, it didn't quite work out. And so it's literally very frustrating to, life is frustrating. And then dealing with that frustration is frustrating. And Neo-Advaita offered a false way out that doesn't actually lead out. It temporarily leads out of problems and frustration, but then it took me and many people I've spoken with, and then it just takes you deeper in to that. Hey, Anton. Beautifully said, Anton. Anton wrote, getting to know our relative selves is so important so we can have a life suited for us. But Neo-Advaita would be like, no, you can't get to know someone who isn't there. Beautifully said, Anton. Um, someone recently summarized Neo-Advaita so beautifully. I said to them, Neo-Advaita is a mind maze. And they were like, I'm going to find what they wrote. It was really beautiful. One moment. And they responded, well, they said Neo-Advaita is a mind maze to endward, downward mind games. And Anton really just highlighted. So, okay, so let's say I wasn't aware. Let's say I wasn't aware of Neo-Advaita, and I just described the situation I described of like, okay, I'm not making good choices to provide for myself, to get myself good sleep. So let's pretend I didn't know about any of this Neo-Advaita stuff. And I'd be like, I don't need sleep. I'm consciousness. Like, sure, I need to tend to the body, but I'm consciousness. Everything's fine. There's no problem. There's no me that can have a problem. And so then I wouldn't tend to it. Or then I would be like, what? Or there'd be this conflict of like, well, but I need to take care of the body. But who is it? Who is it that needs to take care of the body? Well, there is no doer, so I can't do anything about it. Like it's just like this. It can just lead to this sort of insanity. And traditional Advaita is based exactly. So Anton wrote, so we can have a life suited for us. So one of the first steps in traditional Advaita is called karma yoga. And karma yoga is about finding your place in society that is specifically suited to your qualities. They'd say state of mind, but that's beautifully said. And traditional Advaita starts with creating a balanced life, and part of having a balanced life is addressing these very kind of issues that Neo-Advaita is like, you don't have to address them because, like Anton said, because there is no you. In the absolute sense, that may or may not be true, but in the relatives, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Anton said, I just recently noticed that I am probably autistic, but how could I know that if I just dissociated from my relative self? So, someone, when they were beginning to emerge from Neo-Advaita, they're like, I'm suffering so much. And then they'd be like, well, who is it that's suffering? And they'd be like, I don't know, but I need to take care of it. Who is it that doesn't know? And who is it that wants to take care of it? And who is it that needs to be taken care of? Like they were, it's such a mind trap that, you know, it's such a mind trap that it can keep you from doing basic, skillful human things. And finally, this person broke through it and like found some support because they realized they needed it. Um, I'm to the point where I won't even talk about anything non-dual with anyone who's not a literal guru, like someone who is recognized within the Hindu tradition, meaning they have a guru who had a guru, someone who's like trained in the script. And when I say scriptures, they're very different. The scriptures, they're more the philosophical texts that are considered scriptures. I just won't even have a conversation with someone about non-duality because it's insanity posing as sanity. Just like these examples Anton just gave. Like it seems to have some truth to it, but just leads down a very dark hole. Yeah, Anton wrote, yes, relatable. I would be like, why would me as awareness need to be in nature or have friends for health reasons? This is not important for my true self. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Neo-Advaita is nihilistic. Traditional Advaita does not seek to eliminate the relative self because you can't. It's not possible. It's really hilarious when a Neo-Advaita teacher will be like, there is no personality here, and they obviously have a personality. And then they do like really unethical behavior. And then they're like, there is no personality. I mean, talk about a mind F. Um, Life just becomes unnavigatable. And the other thing I've gotten really clear on is it's my contention, it's my argument that if me or anyone else is reading non-dual literature, and most non-dual literature isn't even non-dual, it's Neo-Advaita, is reading something related to non-duality on their own and trying to understand it on their own, that's a Neo-Advaita activity. Like if you don't have a guru you can go to and ask questions, then you're doing it on your own. And that's not how traditional non-duality works. For like a very rare saint can do it on their own. And arrogantly, I thought I was such a being. Ha 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 ha. So yeah. I'm going to wrap up in a minute or two. If any other questions or comments, Anton, great points. Thank you so much. I'm tired. True devils. True devils. Oh my God, well said. So Anton wrote, true devils, telling people to get rid of their personalities, getting paid for it, at the same time having narcissistic personalities. And then if you bring this up to them, they would just say that I'm projecting onto them. That's where it gets really, and I've just become aware of that recently, is the emotional games. I've been aware of the mind games, the philosophical games, but then some Neo-Advaita teachers play emotional games. For example, saying, oh, you're just projecting onto me. Actually, about a month and a half ago, I got into a heated argument with a Neo-Advaita teacher live. They showed up. They showed up. Is that correct? They showed up. They came to a non-duality gathering and started spewing their Neo-Advaita stuff. And I got in a very vigorous argument. And at a certain point, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me imitate them. I'm sorry that I've triggered trauma for you." Like I was getting fiery, and "Oh, I'm sorry that I've triggered trauma for you," or I would. And at one point, I just straight up said to this person, I was like, I feel like everything you're saying is fake. I don't trust anything you're saying. It just feels like an act to me. And they didn't respond. But a typical manipulative response could have been exactly what Anton said of like, oh, you're just projecting that onto me. And here's where it gets sticky is like there could be an ounce of truth in that. And there could be, but That's what gaslighting is. You probably, everyone's heard the phrase, or if you haven't, gaslighting is when you criticize something that's not right and the person turns it back onto the critic. That's what gaslighting is. And that's like a key. It's like a fundamental piece of how cults work. Uh, uh, Criticizing the critic instead of addressing what's said, attacking, criticizing, or putting down the critic. And I hadn't been aware of this, but a lot of Neo-Advaita teachers play not just philosophy mind games, like Anton mentioned, like, saying there's no personality, but then they also play sort of um, emotional manipulative games. And to go back to my first point, that's the opposite of relationship. Like if I say to someone like, um, this is ridiculous. You have a personality and your personality seems really selfish to me. And if they don't, so that's the message. Like let's say that's the message I've just delivered. But in gaslighting, the message isn't addressed. The message is pushed aside, and then the messenger is then attacked. Like maybe like what Anton said, like, oh, you're just projecting onto me. Hey, Cece. Yes. Thanks for saying hi. Yes, I'm going to. I'm contemplating on structure. Like, what's the best way to structure it? I think what I'm going to do is my current plan is to do something that's more like a class that has discussion in it. Because basically, we had a wide range of people, like some people who were very knowledgeable about Neo-Advaita and some people who were like just beginning to question. So that's my plan. So what I've done on my website is I've started to create it's not really a class, but kind of a class. I call it Neo-Advaita 101 that just kind of gives an overview of Neo-Advaita and the harms. And so that's my current plan. I'm kind of sitting with it. I'm also working on a move. So you asking me kind of gives me a little nudge to move forward on that. And yeah, it's I'm kind of learning as I go along, and I'm just learning as I go along. Like how can what can I do to like what would be most helpful? That's my question. Like what would be most helpful? And I think once we can get people on a similar page about what Neo-Advaita is, and I think once that happens, then the support group will be more helpful. So I'm still just meditating. Thank you. Aw, thank you. It is a fight. I didn't realize, but it is a fight. It's not so much a fight to stop Neo-Advaita teachers, although when I started, like that was my mission. Like I'm going to educate the world and stop. But I realized I can't, because delusion has been going on throughout all of human history. I can't stop it, but what I can do is I can, share what's helped me, and occasionally it's almost like people need to go down the hole. Some people just need to go down the hole. what am I trying to say? Actually, so I've spoken about this person who he's not quite a Neo-Advaita teacher in that he doesn't get up and teach, but he basically runs kind of one-on-one cults who get in relationships with women, and he does talk Neo-Advaita talk, and like he appears all spiritual and awake, and so I talked to one of his ex-girlfriends, and I was like, how can we prevent people from getting involved in relationships with this guy? And she's like, there's nothing you could have said that would have stopped me. And that really hit me hard. And I think that's true for me as well. With my trip down the Neo-Advaita, there's nothing that anyone could have said that would have stopped me. I don't think that's the case for everyone. Like, I had one person show up on chat once, and she's like, well, what is Neo-Advaita? She's very new to all this. And I was like, da 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 da. And she's like, oh. She's like, yeah, when I do that stuff, I feel depressed. She's like, I'm going to not do that anymore. So it's like occasionally you can catch people before they go down the hole. And that's, of course, very satisfying. And for some reason, some of us just have to go down the hole. I don't claim to understand it. But this woman who said this, she was a very, very wise woman. And she just very bluntly, she's like, because that's what I said is I talked to her about doing a documentary about this guy, not just to expose him, but also like to help prevent people. And she's like, there's nothing anyone could have said that would have stopped me. And that's, they talk about it in Vedic philosophy. Maya, the power of Maya is that it's enticing. Maya makes untrue, harmful, unhelpful, it makes those things enticing. Like, Maya just isn't untruth, it's deception, right? Like, I can be like, this is full of liquid, and there's a little bit. But that would be untrue because I said full. But I could also be like, like make a noise with my mouth, like so that it sounds like there's liquid in there. Or I could be like, that's so good, so refreshing. Like that's deception. That's willfully trying to pass something, and I don't think most Neo-Advaita teachers realize that they're passing along untruth. I think a couple of them do, but I think most of them think it's actually true. So we're not just up against Neo-Advaita teaching or Neo-Advaita teachers. We're up against Maya, which all human beings are. And Neo-Advaita is just its own particular flavor of Maya, and it's very tricky. And by the way, I'm not a Hindu teacher of any, so I invite you to look up your own, come to your own understanding of Maya. But partially what I'm saying is coming from a conversation I had with a Hindu Swami about Neo-Advaita, is truth posing as untruth. CC, I think you're right, CC, that's one of the most important parts of the group, is the support group, is literally just the fact that I'm not alone. Right, until I started making these videos, I felt so alone. And so that's thank you, CC. It's it's like, who can you talk to about this? Anton, as in Star Wars, you play a part and bring balance to the Force. I mean, isn't that's the beauty? That's the beauty of, and they talk about this in addiction recovery, is addiction sucks. And I assume most people who fell for Neo-Advaita have some level of addictive behavior, probably not all, but the thing is, when you recover from addiction, the hell you experience, you can use that hell to then help other people. And that's the beauty of it. And I love the Star Wars reference. AG, the new pandemic, it is. I would say spiritual bypass is the new pandemic, and Neo-Advaita is like the alpha, like the best form of spiritual bypass in the book. An Indian, hi. I can see why Westerners are attracted to it. Oh, it's the material reductionist. I don't quite understand. It's the material reductionist viewpoint. I've often thought, I mean, it's definitely reductionist, and it's definitely a shortcut. I just don't understand the material reference. But in a funny kind of way, it's atheistic. Neo-Advaita is atheistic in its own way. So that might be, and as Westerners, it's like we didn't know any different, I mean, Neo-Advaita is alive and well in India, so I hear. But as Westerners, we had no defense because we haven't studied the Bhagavad Gita, and we don't really know the Upanishads. And I mean, we don't know the Brahma Sutras, but I don't think most Indians know the Brahma Sutras. But those are the three texts. So we were totally defenseless. All right, team, I want to keep talking, and I need to wrap up here. Anton, beautiful comments. CC, great to see and hear from you again, and thank you for the nudge. So your statements give me a nudge to get the next one going. And AG, thanks for your input. Yes. As Westerners, we're particularly susceptible to the new pandemic or the new strain of the new pandemic. Thank you, beautiful beings. Your feedback and input, it means the world to me. And, it's sweet to receive. I'm not going to lie. It's sweet to receive appreciation. Like Anton, you just said, like, hey, you're doing stellar work. Or AG said you're doing stellar work, and Anton, like, you're fighting the good fight. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, that feels good. And what really feels good, is hearing impact, hearing what am I trying to say? To contribute to another life. To contribute is so meaningful. And that's one of the things that Neo-Advaita robs us of. This idea of the beauty of service and contribution, just like the basic human stuff, connection, healthy enjoyment. Anton mentioned nature, and then service, like helping, like being helpful. Part of this process is relearning what it is to be human and what we as human beings need. Thank you so much, beautiful souls. Hope to see and feel all of you soon. Take care.